ask. We do not yield. We return. And the patrol's 30 ships, vessels designed to cow lesser races, suddenly seemed fragile, their shields flickering in comparison to the monstrous readings pouring off the human ship, energy levels that dwarfed their understanding, weapon signatures that suggested technology refined not through conquest, but through survival against extinction itself. Panic whispered in command decks, officers once smug now choking on fear as the humans moved with terrifying precision, their ship sliding forward not as a relic, but as a predator emerging from the dark, its movements controlled, deliberate, inevitable. And when the first pulse of human weaponry tore through space, not to annihilate, but to demonstrate, the aliens understood that they were not watching an old myth. They were witnessing the embodiment of a warning ignored for millennia. For the humans had been driven into legend not because they were weak, but because they had chosen to vanish, to wait, to sharpen their claws in silence until the galaxy forgot them. The fleet shattered, not destroyed by fire, but by the collapse of morale, captains fleeing, soldiers refusing to fight, entire ships breaking formation as the battleship's voice continued, speaking not to one empire, but to all, its broadcast flooding every frequency the Council thought secure, declaring in tones that brooked no rebuttal that humanity was neither dead nor forgotten. And as the signal reached the Senate chambers, beings who had mocked the very name felt their blood run cold. Because the humans did not ask for recognition, they took it, and their presence alone rewrote centuries of arrogance. In the aftermath, when the wreckage of the patrol drifted like ash across the void, when the surviving admirals returned broken in spirit, the Council sat in paralyzed silence, knowing that a legend had stepped out of shadow and forced itself upon reality, and no decree, no mockery, no erasure could undo the truth that had been seared into galactic memory. That the myths were alive, that the humans had spoken, and that from this moment forward every whisper across every star would carry the same haunting phrase: the folktales walk again, and their battleships do not forgive. Under the vaulted chamber of the Galactic Council, where 100 banners of 100 worlds hung in silent arrogance, the very notion of humans was nothing more than a convenient joke to fill the silence between policy and war, and the delegates treated the stories of humanity as one might treat a child's bedtime tale, whispered myths of a species that had once burned too bright, said to have vanished long before the stars of the core had learned to speak their names. The elder races laughed when their scholars mentioned Earth, dismissing it as a phantom world, a cultural relic of the primitive past, and so when the counselors gathered, cloaked in authority, they mocked the folktale of humans as a reminder that empires rise, stories linger, and the truth is forgotten, until one cycle a warning lit the chamber's walls. A signal, faint and distorted, bearing a rhythm none could mistake, a heartbeat encoded in mathematics. The kind of simple yet deliberate pulse that only intelligence could shape, and though some scoffed and claimed it a malfunction, the Council's admirals ordered scouts dispatched, confident it would prove another ghost in the void. Their laughter carried into the halls, even as their warships sailed to intercept the anomaly, armed with centuries of supremacy and the smugness of those who believed they had seen every threat the galaxy could offer. Yet as they drew closer, the laughter began to falter, for the signal grew sharper, louder, a voice rising from the static until the scanners trembled with an identity long denied. UNSV Resolute, designation human, a battleship name that had not been uttered in 1,000 generations. Silence fell on the bridge as captains stared at their screens, their minds refusing to align myth with reality, and still the dark void split open, a silhouette of impossible geometry sliding out from a shroud of distortion, its hull painted black as voidstone, its edges traced with the scars of wars no archive remembered, and its very presence pressed against their senses like a weight, like a memory returning uninvited, until the council chamber itself was called to emergency session. Every delegate staring at the projection of a ship thought dead, thought impossible, thought legendary. Arguments died on their tongues, disbelief drained into silence, and then the battleship spoke. Not in a stammer, not in hesitation, but in a voice that carried the steady calm of a predator that had never doubted its place at the top of the chain, declaring, "This is humanity. You have been heard." The words struck like thunder, cracking the facade of certainty across the chamber, because legends were not supposed to speak, not supposed to announce themselves with such undeniable authority. And yet here was a vessel bearing human insignia, a relic of myth now casting a shadow over living empires. And when the council's fleets formed to surround it, they found their weapons locked by systems too ancient to trace. Their drives disrupted by code that reached into their machines like a forgotten master reclaiming old tools. And as panic spread, the humans did not fire. They did not even raise their shields. Instead, they simply advanced, engines burning with a technology no one could read, cutting through defensive lines as though strolling through fog. And the fleets of a dozen races broke formation, their proud admirals stripped of arrogance, reduced to awe. Watching helplessly as a single human battleship moved, as though the laws of war were written for it alone. In that moment, the myth became a mirror, forcing the galaxy to see its fragility, for every story whispered in backrooms about humans, their wars, their endurance, their refusal to die, now stood embodied before them, undeniable, and the counselors who had once laughed could not find their voices, because humanity had returned not as refugees or wanderers, but as judges, bearing the calm silence of a species that had outlasted the very ages meant to bury them. No treaty could explain it, no archive could justify it, and when the battleship's voice spoke again, it was not a threat but a reminder. We were watching long before you named yourselves rulers, and we are watching still, leaving the galaxy trembling under the weight of words that shifted history. For in one revelation the myths were made real, the arrogance of empires was shattered, and the council halls that once echoed with laughter now whispered with fear, with awe, with the single truth that could not be unlearned. Humans were not gone, they had never been gone, and now that they had spoken, the galaxy could no longer pretend. And as the black silhouette of the Resolute vanished back into distortion, leaving broken fleets and broken certainty in its wake, the council dared not move, dared not speak. For the myths had stepped out of shadow, and every star seemed colder with the knowledge that humanity had returned, patient, powerful, and very, very real.